Aloha, and welcome to the Groundswell Marketing Podcast, where I connect with outstanding humans and sustainable ideas. Today's guest is Sean Callagy. He's a foremost expert in integrity-based human influence. He's also one of the top lawyers in North America, if not the world. He's recovered $350 million of healthcare clients in terms of recoveries. He's got 2 of the top 100 national jury verdicts. I mean, it puts him in the 0.001% of lawyers. He's an unbelievable influence. I just came back from surfing with him in New Jersey, and to top it off, he's blind. And he is somebody who's developed this process called the Callagy Results Formula. And that's what we're going to talk about today in those 3-part series, which is how it can impact your business, your life, and give you sustainable and rocket fuel for sales in an integrity ethical way. So without further ado, let's paddle in. All right. Well, let's just duck dive and introduce our newest guest here. Welcome to the show, Sean.
Hey, Scott. How are you?
Awesome. Really good. Just had a great drive with you, and we were just diving into a hair-raising drive. And, obviously what's come out of the drive in the last couple of days of spending time together, it's really clear to me that I'm just starting to really get sort of real grasp of your philosophy and your strategies and the Callagy Results system. And I was wondering if you could kind of this is going to be a really incredible in-depth episode, probably the deepest. I haven't done anything like this before, by the way, so this format's going to be a little bit different. But what we're going to have Sean do is he's going to give an overview of the Callagy Results system, and then he's going to break down the 3 different areas, and I'll let him sort of take the ball from here. But he's going to give you guys some really interesting, in-depth breakdown understanding of just why this is one of the most important new technologies that's going to help businesses, break through their sales. So, Sean, why don't you start with a little overview? Tell us a little bit about it.
Scott, well, thank you so much for having me. And it was a harrowing 115-mile-an-hour car ride up the Parkway. We would say who was driving because they could go to jail, But we had some surfing and some incredible things. So I'm really grateful for the time we've got to spend together. And I'm super looking forward to paddling in.
Absolutely. Well, let's paddle right into it.
All right. So here's the story. Peak performance for me was something that was rooted in my life from the very beginning. My heroes were fictional and non-fictional. I love sports. I also love characters like Batman and James Bond, and my favorite hero being Batman, or superhero, because he had no superpowers. And his superpower, which was that of a regular human being, was to develop himself. And then in 1980, and we're here in my library, the Miracle on Ice team jersey is behind us, signed by everyone. These were people that performed at extraordinary levels and did remarkable things. So I always had this dream growing up when I was 10 years old in 1980 when that happened, that people could do things that were beyond what most other people, at that time I guess I thought that most people could do. Now I think it's that most people think they can do. And so that was the setting, and I marched forward through athletics and sports, and I had dreams of being a professional athlete and dreams of playing in college. And when I was 16 years old, I had the remarkable good fortune of having a sports psychologist come to my high school. And when this gentleman came in, it was $10 for this course in imagery and visualization. And I said, I'm just going to do this, and I'm going to just show up. So I showed up, and about 20 plus other kids showed up. And that night, I laid there on the floor when he told us to do this exercise and turned out all the lights. And when the other guys were joking around and being goofy, I just said, I'm going to play full out. I'm going to participate and see what happens. And it was really rooted in that idea that what's it going to cost me to do this? And I think it even struck me at 16 that a lot of times folks didn't apply themselves fully because they were afraid that maybe they wouldn't get there. And I just went all in. And the results were remarkable. And I started weight training around that time. And I started modeling before I knew what it was called, and produced really unique results. And all of a sudden, I went from not starting as a sophomore in high school on varsity to having 100 Division I offers as a junior. And it was this transformational time in my life. And believe me, there's a ton of stuff that happened where I lost perspective, I gained perspective. I have words for all that now. And my performance went up and down. And it was really painful for me because I had a lot of success. I ended up going to Columbia University to play baseball. And my career was up and down and up and down. And I started and was off like gangbusters. Then my sophomore year, I almost ended up quitting. My junior year, I was back to one of the top hitters in the country for most of the season. My senior, I was captain. So it all ended really well, but it bothered me and plagued me. Like, why did it have to be that way? Why were there these ups and downs and these different things? And when I look back now, it's super clear to me. And I'll get to that in a little bit. But that was really the beginning. And then I didn't get drafted because I have a hereditary eye disease. I'm legally blind, called retinitis pigmentosa. It was just beginning to affect me. So that led to me not going on and playing professionally. And I was really heartbroken on June 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of 1992 when I didn't get drafted. And I sat there hoping the phone would ring, knowing it wouldn't because word was out that I had this eye condition. And then I decided after working in New York City for a year that I would go to law school because I had no idea what else to do. I had always wanted to be a professional athlete. I didn't want to be a lawyer. I didn't want to be anything in particular. And I think at that time, my goal really was to just make an income and a living. And I went to law school and I won the game of law school. I figured out the hacks and the processes. And it was really incredible because some of the people who were there had been valedictorians of their college and now they were struggling because the game of law school, the academic process was so different. And I assimilated incredibly well to it, and I won the game of law school, and I got my dream job. And that was really the setup for my launch into the world of accelerated business personal development. Because I think, Scott, that everything we just described, your childhood, everybody listening out there, their childhood, we're all just engaged in a process of personal development from the time that we learn to ride a bicycle, to play a sport, to read, all of its personal development. And I think that people just stop at some point. So that was really the beginning for me.
Okay, cool. So that was the beginning of the journey. So what led to, from there, I know there's a bit of a history that I think was really important for people to hear and understand, which is you've made some remarkable life achievements as a lawyer. And I think those have led to what some of the technology and insights that you're going to share with us. Do you want to share with us some of those insights? I think really sets the bar for not only just your incredible credibility, but just your fortitude to go through and the tools that got you through. So do you want to share that? Yeah,
sure. Thank you. So that history, and thank you for identifying that, was really the first access point. And the history for everybody out there is relevant to them because the cornerstone of my Callagy results formula is that we're never-endingly engaged in a process of personal development. We just think it's something different. We think it's going to a seminar or reading a new book, but it's really what we're all engaged in. We're developing in some way, and the question is whether it's intentional or not. So my deep dive into the business side of all this is I get my dream job, and I quickly realize that everybody is depressed and frustrated and upset. And I decide that I can't live my life this way. I go to my chiropractor. He tells me to read Awaken the Giant Within by Tony Robbins before I quit the law. And I'm only a few months out of law school at that point. And I felt like the book was speaking to my heart and soul. And that book, to me, is artistry and a concept of self-mastery, which is one of the pillars of producing results that I'll get into in a moment. And I began, and that book also said read other people's work. So I started reading the work of Jay Abraham and studying his exponential and geometric acceleration of relationship development and marketing, Napoleon Hill, Dale Carnegie, many other geniuses. So I read this and said, this is just like sports, that there's an access to creating results at a much more accelerated level. And I'm going to figure out if all this works. And if it does, what an amazing way to live life. But to teach people these things, because in a capitalist system, people live in stress and fear about money and time and balancing with their family and love. And I didn't want to have any of those processes because my dad and my stepdad, beautiful souls, wonderful people, worked incredibly hard, but never felt fulfilled by what they did at a deep level. And they felt some level of stress and great guys. I'm like, I don't want to live that life. I don't want other people to have to live that life. I want more choice for folks. So I start putting this all together, and all of a sudden, applying the principles I'm learning, and it was a combination predominantly in the beginning of the work of Tony Robbins, the work of Jay Abraham, and one other amazing book I bought for $1 at a garage sale called How to Make a Fortune from Public Speaking. And putting all those things together into my own recipe, all of a sudden incredible results happened. And in a service business, I certainly didn't create Google, but I've never heard of anybody doing what I did. I had a 40-person law firm in my 20s, less than 2 years out of law school. And it was all rooted in this concept that folks that are able to sell and generate business and obviously have some level of leadership structure to be able to scale and grow have just a lot more freedom and choice. It doesn't make you a better person. It doesn't make you anything except more free to make choices than other people. That's what I believed. So in a nutshell, this oil boil, and this result, by the way, I'll list a couple of things real quickly and then explain the overview of the formula. It led to me having my dream beach house still in my 20s. When I was $100,000 in debt and started my own law firm, my credit card had no contacts in the world. And this isn't about me. It's about the power of the technology that I was assimilating and synthesizing and putting together. So then I eventually sold my law firm. I started a training development program, and out of 1,000 graduates of my coaching school, at the time I graduated, there had been 1,000. In 3 months, I built the most successful coaching and training practice. Out of my graduating class of 36 in New Jersey, I was the only person that had, within the first year, a coaching business they could do full time, and I had one in the first 3 months. I went on to have 2 top 100 national jury verdicts, one of only 2 lawyers in America to do that between 2014 and 16, having nothing to do with being a lawyer and everything to do with having a unique access to producing results. I have 6 offices in 5 states with 125 people that work for my law firm at this point. And I feel incredibly confident about my ability to get on stage and speak and influence crowds. And all this comes down to, Scott, a very simple formula after you identify your results. And I'll talk about that second. But that formula is very simply, with a lot of depth and distinctions, it's 100 hours of content: process mastery, influence mastery, and self-mastery. Process mastery is what you do, which is rooted in modeling and time blocking. Influence mastery is the ability to go from hello to yes with people with integrity. And self-mastery is the ability to get ourselves to take zone action, meaning the most efficient action step necessary in any situation to produce the results and outcomes we want. And that's the formula. The selection process for the formula, though, becomes amazingly valuable and critical as well. And I was introduced 16 years ago when I went to coaching school, and it was not a dynamic process coaching school. It wasn't something that I would sit back and go, wow, I'm a certified coach that means something in the world. I don't think it really does at all. With respect to the ICF and everything they're doing, I think that's a longer conversation for a different podcast. But I think that the real benefit is not purely coaching. It's also teaching people things and holding people accountable, but we'll talk more about that later. The key distinction, though, that I took away from coaching school was something called the Wheel of Life. And I think a lot of us have seen that by now, but I had never seen it before in 2003. And it was a newly introduced element that some of the coaching schools were using. And it broke your life down into 8 different spokes, and you could sort of make it whatever you wanted to, and you could decide where you were in each category. And something that I felt was an important distinction off of those wheels is that you could break that wheel down into anything you wanted as subsections. So for example, if in the Wheel of Life, it has a category on health and a category on finance, well, finance isn't just one thing. It's broken down to its own wheel for each individual person, but the way I do it when I work with people is break it down into 8 components also. The Wheel of Health can be broken down to 8 components also. Each spoke can be broken down to their own components. And the Wheel of Business, just like the other spokes or career, can be broken into 8 components. So when we're selecting the results and outcomes we want, here's the point, a lot of folks do it in a vacuum. And I've worked with lots of different coaches in my life where they've coached me, and a lot of them will say, hey, so you know what, Sean, like what are your top outcomes? And if you're picking them, if I said to you right now, what are your top outcomes, Scott? And you pick them in a vacuum in one conversation, my hallucination is that you'd come up with outcomes that would be potentially out of balance, potentially be selected by mood. And when you use the wheels, you're looking at your entire life in context, and you're appropriately, the simple way to put this is you're appropriately putting your life into balance and making conscious decisions about the outcomes you want in every area, but that could produce 24 to 32 different outcomes you want. And then you're boiling those things down into the most important categories, because I believe in conscious imbalance, that your life is never really in full balance, that you may hit a homeostasis briefly, but most times we're prioritizing things differently. So the formula in a nutshell is designed not only to help you produce your outcomes predictably and consistently, it's literally the formula of formulas over all of personal development, but also to identify and select the outcomes you want in every area of your life with the highest degree of consciousness. And that's the work that I accessed in my early 30s, not feeling, here's the key distinction, I didn't feel like I discovered something. I didn't feel like I created something. I actually felt like I discovered something. Like, this is just the way life is. There's an access to selecting your outcomes, and then there's this formula that everybody uses long before we ever came along, going back into time, that when you look at George Washington and how he was the president and won the Revolutionary War, this same formula applied to his success. When you look at things that occurred for people that had a degree of success, like Bill Clinton, high degree of success, some real problems, the formula applies to that, and for everyone in human history. And that was the work that was done in my late 20s to early 30s, and it was a very dynamic, fulfilling, and incredible time. But one more thing, this formula, when I apply it, I get incredible results. When I don't apply it, I don't get incredible results. And the way we do and don't apply it is also contained in the formula itself. So that's a scoop.
Conscious imbalance. So that's really interesting. So, and my very first podcast with Bruce Kasanoff, Humans Not Customers, he has something similar to that. And I find this really interesting that there's a correlation here. And just let me make sure I'm understanding what you're saying by conscious imbalance. So conscious imbalance, are you saying that, like right now, for example, we're consciously well into our day, it's late at night, and we're going to probably go into even later in the night. We've already been up since early this morning. We're consciously, maybe we should be going to bed, but we're consciously being out of balance because we know that this is more important to get this message out. Is that what you're referring to, or could you describe that a little?
Yeah, that's absolutely, Scott, what I'm referring to. And thank you. Yeah, you've been up incredibly early, been working hard and having some fun, but working incredibly hard. And at this stage of my life, I've made a decision to be consciously imbalanced for the advancement, acceleration of this platform, my work, my mission in life, related to my career. At times in my life previously, I have been consciously imbalanced to be generating the greatest relationships I could and fulfilling the needs of my kids, my children. And so while I was certainly taking care of business, I was blessed to figure out a formula that allowed me to live more as a business owner than operator. Tim Ferriss-like 4-hour work week scenario, a little different, but at least in the same general zip code. That imbalance, though, led to plateauing at a place that was far below my capability. And I think for all of us, we operate far below our ultimate capability in different areas, except the ones we're super focusing on. So, for example, if somebody decides they want to run the New York Marathon, their life is going to go into some conscious imbalance. They can do work and get other things done, but the marathon is going to take a priority until it doesn't, and then maybe they break up their training. But if somebody's serious about it and wants to go get it done, that's going to become the priority, and the other thing is going to slip into a lower positioning. For some, they'll have a period of time in their life where they really decide they want to meet somebody and they want to get married and they want to accelerate in that area, and they'll move into a conscious imbalance, meaning the first thing they might be checking is some dating apps or websites or things, and that's going to become the pull, the gravitational center of what they're up to. So I believe that very much our acceleration doesn't come from looking at the 8 areas of our life. If we break them up that way, maybe it's 6, maybe it's 10. It could be individualized how you chunk things. But when we're advancing, we're always prioritizing something in a certain way over the other things, and that's what I mean by conscious imbalance.
How does somebody know if they're fooling themselves, where they're actually out of balance, but it's not consciously strategic?
Yeah, I think that's why the formula I'm certain is so valuable, because it allows you to go to the wheels and to look at where you are in each area. So the wheels themselves are broken up into these 8 different categories, like slices of a pizza or spokes on a bicycle.
Can you tell us like the 8 categories?
I'm sorry?
Can you tell us the 8 categories?
Sure. So the 8 categories, depending upon, again, how you do it, are health, fitness, 2 different things, spirituality, contribution, career, finance, relationships, and fun overall.
Okay.
Just the fun in your life. So those 8 categories at times in your life, and fun could include adventure. So those are my 8 categories. Your 8 categories could be 9. They could be slightly different, but I believe in the wheel as a base. The categories themselves aren't the most relevant. Those are the ones that I utilize, but you could utilize some different ones. So when you have those categories, though, it allows you then to sit down and rate your life in each of those categories from a scale of 1 to 10 on your scale. So if your idea of having optimal fitness is whatever it is, and let's say it's to have a certain amount of physical activity on a daily basis, let's say. And for somebody else, it's to run a 5-minute mile. You're going to be scoring yourselves on your own subjective scale, not an objective scale in each of these categories. So you'll have like what your ideal is, and then you'll be rating yourself against your ideal. And let's say that you're a 5 against your ideal in the category of spirituality. And let's say that you're a 6 in the category of your career, and that you're an 8 in the category of finance. And you go around and rate yourself in each category. Then what you ask yourself is, what are the top 1, 2, or 3 outcomes that I would have to achieve to move myself up the scale to a place that I want to be? So maybe you want to be a 9, maybe you want to be a 9.5. And you set that in each category, so now you have 3 different outcomes in each of these different areas, which would total 24. Maybe you go up to 4, maybe it's you have 2. So it's somewhere between 16 and 32 outcomes you would have sitting on a page categorized by each of these different areas of your life. At that point, you're going to make decisions about, okay, what am I going to prioritize? So it gets challenging to kid yourself in these areas because you're looking at it. So if somebody goes, I just got to keep working, and the rest will catch up. Well, you're looking at where you are. And if you're saying that let's say you're married and you're looking at your relationship and you're in a 4 because you've rated yourself. Now, of course, you could delude yourself and say it's better than it is, of course. But I don't see that people tend to do that. You're looking at what the ideal is.
Not if they want to improve themselves, they're going to be honest. They need to be.
Yeah, so then you're looking at it and you go, it's a 4. Like, oh boy, okay, well, I'd have to do these 1, 2, and 3 things. And then people are left with conscious choices to make about whether or not they want to grow in these areas and how they want to rebalance their life. So I advocate very strongly that at a minimum, people go through the wheel of life at least once a quarter, but they're also reviewing regularly and consistently in their journaling where they stand in different outcomes and advancements in the different areas of their life. I mean, that's its own conversation, but that's how I see this all fitting together and how it becomes challenging for people to kid themselves, because the only thing, Scott, that we can do is the only things we can manage in our life are those things we can measure and monitor. So if there's no numbers associated to things, it gives us the ability to do what you just said, which is to kid ourselves and be more subjective. And when we have numbers rating different things in different ways, we become a lot more clear on what's happening.
Interesting. So journaling, that was actually one of the questions Jill wanted me to ask you. She was really curious about journaling and what you meant by that.
Okay. So journaling to me, and it can be done in a lot of different ways. Since I've lost my vision, I no longer journal in hardbound books. I did for a long time. And so now I would do it on a computer, or my cell phone, actually. People could certainly do it on a computer. And journaling, to me, is really the scoreboard. It's a few things. One thing it is the scoreboard of your life. Well, ultimately, let me say this. Journaling is the tool of self-mastery. So journaling is the tool of self-mastery. As the tool of self-mastery, it's a scoreboard for your life in the different categories. It contains your driving why of your life, which is the foundational component of your self-mastery. It's what that pull is in your life, right, forward. Mm-hmm. It's also helping you numerically score your progress as you go along. So, for example, let's say you want to increase your finances. You're going to be looking at the outcomes you have in your journal each and every day. And I suggest people literally look at their journal at the beginning and end of every single day. Because the more we look at things, the more pain it creates to move us forward, and pleasure that it creates to move us forward. But I believe people are much more influenced by pain than pleasure. So, for example, if we want to lose weight, if we're not looking at the scale every day, if we are looking at the scale every day, it's going to create pain and create leverage for us. The reason that most people don't look at the scale is because they don't want to have the pain to drive them forward. So you know that you're in a challenging state and position, and we have a whole formula on self-mastery that we could talk about, but you know you're in pain and a challenged position when you're not journaling and not reviewing your journaling. You're not going back to your outcomes. You're not seeing what's happening. And the reason is just like the scale is that people want to have avoidance, because the greatest thing that people fear is, the greatest pain that people have is fear. They fear failing and they fear being rejected. They fear the fear of failure is something that they internalize, and the fear of rejection is something that's more externalized. And when people fear rejection of others, it's the dynamic of having other people know they've set a goal, or having other people say no to you. All of that goes on, and the fear of failure is internal, and that's more what I'm talking about in the journaling. So when you're fearing your failure, you don't look at your journal because you just don't want to see yourself missing your outcomes. So journaling contains this mechanism of scoring everything that you're doing, rooting you in all your foundational components, and driving your action forward. And when you're using it effectively, it is astounding the acceleration it creates.
What happens when you change your standards? So, for example, I remember when what I used to think an 8 was in my relationship, I now view as being a pathetic 2. I've totally changed the way I view my relationship.
And you have an amazing, I've witnessed it and seen it, and it is clear that you've done incredible work in that space, and congratulations on that. A lot of focus,
yeah.
No, you're amazing.
But I remember if I would have done what you're saying, I would have probably gone, I'm an 8 and it's happening, and now I just go, wow, not even close. So how does one sort of, like, as they raise their standards or their self-perception, or maybe they're more honest with their perception or whatever it is, is it just a matter of, because you're reviewing it, you're actually just, like, you almost can recalibrate your wheel? Like, is there like a reset sort of thing when you're trying to set a new standard? Or is it just sort of evolve? Like, and then second piece of that is, I would love to hear more about the wheel behind the wheel. Like under each of those categories, could you pick one and give an example of what would be sort of within one of those wheels?
Sure. So first of all, nobody's ever asked me that question before. That's an amazing question. Thank you. About the recalibration and shifting standards. So as you look at the categories and you're going through the wheel, I think it's exactly what you said, that there's a natural recalibration to what is the level you want to be at. So this is all subjective, and we take us with us. So each quarter, when you're reviewing it and you say, okay, where am I and what's optimal? It's a shifting what's optimal. Like the space I am in my career right now, I would never have dreamed of. Almost never have dreamed of when I was 27. I was just hoping to pay off my student loans. So if I would have rated myself at that point in the place that I'm in, I would have looked at just making an extra $75,000 at that point. That would have put me at a level 10. Mm-hmm. And now, the place that I'm in right now, in comparison to my capacity, I would put myself at about a 6. And so it's exactly that there's and I'm not saying it to put myself down. There's a progression that happens as we're consistently looking at the wheel, and we're subjectively recalibrating all the way along, that raises our standards. If this is all happening in a highly functional way, there's that acceleration of raising your standards. And that relates to a whole bunch of other topics as well. But yes, I would say you are dead on that's what happens. There's a natural recalibration as long as we're progressing.
So is there any danger with allowing yourself to recalibrate and move the bar where you're never really satisfied? Because I think that's like, just like when is enough kind of thing, right?
Yeah,
how does the fulfillment, or where can you celebrate, or where can you ensure that this doesn't create more dissatisfaction? Is that even possible?
Amazing. You are you're a deep thinker asking amazing questions. So thank you.
Thanks. I'm deeply listening because this is really powerful stuff. So I just want everybody to really get like the distinctions
So thank you. So my answer to that would be that you are, I am, everyone is enough. And to live in a state of absolute gratitude and contentment. So while I might rate myself as a 6 currently in terms of what's possible, which is seismically far away, because I believe that as you rise up the level and scale of mastery, these numbers getting closer to a 10, there's an exponential shift. So a 6 isn't 60% of 10. A 6 is seismically away from 10. And at the very same time, I wake up every day in gratitude, absolute gratitude. I live in gratitude. I'm thankful. And it's almost like I view this as you're a surfer. We had fun doing that. You're a snowboarder in the backcountry. And if you're doing, let's say that you're looking to snowboard in new terrain or ski or surf a different wave or a different break, and it's more challenging, and it just doesn't work out, and you don't get yourself there, I don't think you would leave. I've met you. I don't think you'd leave saying like, wow, like I stink and I'm terrible. You're just in gratitude for the experience and the challenge. So the way I see these categories and the growth of our subjective rating of what we're capable of, where we want to go, is that we're in gratitude at the same time for what we have, for the experiences of moving forward, and for the journey itself. And that's really the secret to being peaceful, happy, and fulfilled. And these aren't just words. Like, that's a beautiful
Oh, you live it.
question.
I mean, that's one of the things I think people are drawn to you. I've seen, experienced, observed, and having intimately spent a lot of time with you, that is really clear. And I think that's one thing that I think people are, when they're looking at you and your life and your life story with such great admiration, they're looking at you as sort of somebody to model. Is that probably one of the biggest distinctions in terms of like how all this works together is like with a layer of gratitude and a little bit of self, I don't know what the word is, but just have a little compassion, self-compassion, but yet where does the balance then go into the drive? Because I've also seen the compassion and stuff, but I see that this tool set that you have here, I've also seen you just be like what you call Zeus energy and driving stuff forward, and also having that sort of almost like, I wouldn't say the opposite of gratitude, but just like such an incredible force to move forward to make shit happen. So what is like, how, like, tell me where this all fits into those two, shades, if you will.
Dude, drop the mic. I mean, amazing insight. Thank you. So I say 10 scrolls every morning, and I got the idea for the 10.
You say 10 scrolls?
I say 10 scrolls, twice in the morning and twice at night. And they were triggered. I modified them slightly from Og Mandino's The Greatest Salesman in the World, which is not about selling. It's about life and fulfillment and peace. It's an amazing book if you haven't read it, Og Mandino. And I learned this the hard way because as I grew up, somehow I associated falsely that punishing myself was a really effective way to drive forward. I used anger as a really core element of accelerating on the athletic field. And in baseball, that didn't work. And so when I look back at the times I had my ups and downs in baseball, and I had a lot of ups, and my downs, a lot of people would be very grateful to have had the downs that I had. But when I had them, they were rooted in me punishing myself. And when I really look back, my college baseball experience was horrendous and not a model at all, because if I didn't get a hit in a game, I wouldn't talk to my family. I wouldn't talk to my girlfriend, and I would sulk and I would punish myself, and I would sit there and obsess, Scott, over numbers and what my batting average was and what I had to do to make up for the game I didn't get the hits in. I was like a lunatic, punishing myself. And to the outside world, I was friendly and lovable and likable. I was very well liked. I was blessed with that my whole life. But I was brutal to myself and on myself. And I do not look back fondly on my college experience because I didn't live in gratitude. I wasn't enjoying what was happening. It was incredible. I played at Columbia University, an Ivy League school. We played in Army and Navy and Princeton and Yale and Harvard. And this is a dream. that was going on. I traveled, played at Notre Dame and Vanderbilt and all these wild experiences. I played in Yankee Stadium. I was in the newspaper all the time. It was incredible. And during the time, I didn't enjoy any of it because it was like an addict to producing the next successful result. That's like how it felt. And if I succeeded, there was no high. It was just like I was okay because I needed to succeed just to be okay. And when I didn't succeed, I was massively in pain. So
why did you have to think that you had to use anger as your only lever to move it forward?
I think it's all that I really knew and had access to. I had a beautiful and amazing family. Neither my dad nor my stepfather played high school sports or college sports. I didn't have any real model in that space that I could turn to, and anger kind of worked. There were times when I was younger when I get angry and I'd hit well, or I was a football player, a wrestler. I had a lot of success in football with anger. I was a really outstanding football player, and it worked. So I'm like, okay, this works, so let me use it in baseball. But then later, I learned, when I reflected back, I saw my self-mastery as such so suboptimal. And I would have said disaster was the word I was going to say. But I try to be conscious about my vocabulary and my language. So I'd say it was just dramatically suboptimal. And I learned when I really got to the work of Tony Robbins and Awaken the Giant Within, I'm like, holy shit. Like, wow, man. Like, if I just understood these dynamics, what could I have done in my baseball career? And then I keep it real. I still didn't learn. My conditioning was still there. So I would still have ups and downs. Even when I was building the law firm and I go up and down and get frustrated and upset, it wasn't what it was in baseball. And I certainly hit a new base camp, but I still struggled in that space. And I struggled in that space for a long time in a lot of ways. And I always had gratitude, but there was always a level for me. It shrunk more and more of punishing myself and being angry. I don't mean like something weird.
No, I think everybody does this. I mean, I think to a certain degree, people who are peak performers that don't have advanced technology thinking and mindset, this is common. I've done it. I know a lot of people that do this. I mean, first you get upset, then you get angry, then you get motivated, and use that anger to motivate you. And I see the cycle, right? So you must have broken through that. What part of this formula helps somebody go way beyond that and the power of that?
Yeah.
Because that, to me, is, I think what we're talking about is so many people that are so hard on themselves, but they feel that they're obligated to be that way in order to move forward. And it's so unnecessary, and it's actually not very powerful. Why and how does this method, and where does it fit in? How does it affect that?
For sure. So self-mastery is the ability to do exactly what you're saying. And self-mastery is rooted in the concept that we have a formula to drive our actions forward, and not just our actions forward, but to live in a peak state, a beautiful state, to live in a place of gratitude. By the way, beautiful state is an access that I enjoyed it when I heard the Tony Robbins seminar. That beautiful state, I agree with. I would normally have said a place of gratitude. Yeah. That's the language I would have used in my formula. So, but I do very much like that access, a beautiful state. And so I've even shifted. So we have a formula, all of us. And self-mastery is about what's your formula, Scott, what's my formula, what's your formula out there to put yourself in that highest performing zone action space where you're living in that balance of gratitude and positivity and joy, fulfillment, magic, fun, achievement, and you're having all these things happen simultaneously. There's a formula for it. So one of the shifts that happened for me over time is I stopped listening to purely angry music to get myself going in a day. I would listen to things, and I still listen to some of it. I would listen to things like Thunderstruck, which I love. I mean, that's a core part of me. I would listen to Rage Against the Machine, Enter Sandman. I would listen to Metallica, harder type things when I wanted to get myself going. And then when I was relaxed, Bruce Springsteen is my favorite artist. But I would use like Badlands, which is an angry song by Bruce, to even get myself going. But I wouldn't listen to the things that were the happier songs, the more aspirational music from him. And in the past number of years, I'd say really the past 5 years, I've really become more conscious of this. And it was a good friend of mine named Ben Burton who said, we don't need as much anger to drive us. And it was less anger, it was more power at that point. He's like, there's And I was like, I don't think so. It's not how I work. And I really started playing with it. And now I listen to things like Bruce Springsteen. There's a song, Land of Hope and Dreams. I listen to Bonfire Heart by James Blunt, which is a song that you hear often at Tony Robbins seminars. I listen to The Rising by Bruce Springsteen, Higher by Creed. And these are songs with energy, but they have a more aspirational energy than a sort of like break things apart energy. And so that plus how we use our physical body, how we would even say like how I would make my moves physically to get myself into a peak place. So all of those things. But
so to be clear, I think the one thing that I want to make sure I understood is unlike other formulas, it says you need to do these things in this order. This is what it is. You're saying first identify what your routine, process, or things that put you into the most optimal state, because we all probably do. I think I know of sometimes, like if I have a great night's sleep and I get up and I do my priming, I listen to an Om while I'm like, in my office. I kind of, sometimes I have these perfect days and I'm like, I just hit repeat on that. Is that what you're referring to? Or like what is, or are you saying there's elements of that, but you need to follow certain steps to get to this mastery?
Yeah, so beautiful. I would say that it's a flexible formula that has to change over time. I wouldn't say. I would absolutely say it's a flexible formula that has to change and shift over time.
Because you change in terms of what motivates you, or?
We do, and things can get played out. Anything that we do can get played out. So, for example, I listened to the song Born to Run by Bruce Springsteen in only the most isolated circumstances. It's my favorite song in the world. It has deep, resonating meaning. But if I listen to Born to Run every day, eventually it would lose its effect. Just like if you took a pill, some type of medication, over time, you need higher and higher dosages, or you need to change things.
I'm totally the same way. I have a couple songs that I don't dare play. They're like my secret weapon. When I'm like going to do something, I'm like, okay, now it's time to pull that thing out. It's my favorite song. I do the exact same thing. That's so funny.
Yeah, amazing, right? And same thing for how we use our physical body. Right. So if I were to do the same thing every day I activate my body before I start my day. And I did it differently when we were at the beach together. It would start by being in the water and swimming and moving around. That activates all your muscles very quickly. On days that I am not going in the water, I'll do other things to make sure I activate every single muscle in my body and have different ways to do it. And I'll do it with weights, I'll do it with bands, I'll do it with neither. But I'm going to activate every muscle in my body. I'm going to activate my facial muscles. I'm going to activate my breathing. I'm going to use music to get myself going. I'm going to listen to certain positive personal development things. There's I shuffle on Alexa songs by Fearless Motivation. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've ever heard those guys, but they put out a whole bunch of sort of riffs using music and sort of speaking combined. It's pretty cool stuff.
Like spoken word with music or something?
Yeah, like that. Yeah, like sort of motivational, inspirational, powerful. Fearless Motivation.
Okay, cool.
And I vary. And I have a few that I like really go to when I really need to get in state. So I may listen, quite frankly, no joke, to other speakers that are in a place that I feel I'm ready to be in and not there yet in terms of the world's perception of who I am, and that will motivate me and fire me up. So I might listen to Grant Cardone, for example, and listen to his Closer Survival Guide, and God bless him, it's brilliant things he's done, and I'll listen to him go, like, dude, are you kidding me? Like, there's no way that this content's better than my content. And I'm saying that with humility, but like gets me going. So I'll listen to that and get stimulated in state. And by the way, to be clear, I will deeply acknowledge his success. I will deeply acknowledge the things he's doing better than me to be where he is, because he's doing something better. So that this isn't like an ego-driven significance thing. It's an acknowledgement of I got to tighten up my process mastery, because my influence mastery and self-mastery I am clear on. So there's something in process mastery he's doing I'm not. What is it? So that's how I'll think, but it will get me stimulated and ready to go. So those are few examples, and we could talk lots more about self-mastery, but they engage our mind, our physical body, and also the numbers that we talked about, our attachment to our why, our aspirational energy. So all those things are being connected. And here's one final key. The final key is it isn't just once a day. It isn't just at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day. we can condition ourselves, Scott, to be so in tune with our state. Look, it's late. We surfed today. We got a ton of sun today. We ate ice cream today. We ate the chicken and the egg today. We did a lot of stuff today that would have every ability to leave us, it's probably close to midnight right now, totally exhausted. But I'm conditioned when I'm going to deliver in this state to like raise my energy, fully connected and like ready to go. That's a conditioned response that's been built up over time, and we could all do it. And that's rooted in the concept of self-mastery. Before we started, I was listening to certain songs. I went upstairs. I did certain things with my body and got myself ready to go. I don't even have to think about it at this point. I'm not perfect at it, but I'm at a high into the 9.9s, okay, with it as a conditioned element of how I show up in the world. And that's what self-mastery really is. Understand the formula throughout the entire day to access the parts of yourself that you need. And I could, as soon as we're done, I could fall asleep, and I'm very thankful for this, and there's no judgment for folks that can't, but I'll be able to fall asleep in 5 minutes or less.
Yeah, everybody hates you right now. So, because some people wish that they could go to sleep that fast. So basically, if I could summarize, self-mastery is about conditioning yourself to be in the most optimal state throughout the entire day.
Yes, to produce the outcome that you want in that slot. Yes.
That's not what I thought self-mastery would be when you described it. I knew that was part of it. Is that really what it is? Like so it's like, because in my mind, I'm going self-mastery is like mastering your body, mastering your, so is it, in my mind, it's those things too? Or is it just, in the end, it's about performance, that the element, it's like your mindset and your ability to be as a peak performer in any thing that you want to accomplish. Like that's kind of what you're summarizing. Or am I missing an element? Did we not spend enough time talking about the other elements?
It is that. But it's about being a peak performer at everything, including fun, gratitude, relaxation, love. So it's about the ability to move yourself, remember the wheel, in all the categories, into whatever state. So when it comes time to connect with my kids, I will be able to segment, let's say I'm not physically present with them and we're just on a phone call. I'll be able to move myself into state, like to be dad. And I'll be able to move myself into, this is what I'm suggesting that we can all do, to move myself into a different type of conversation that I'm not at the effect, we're at cause over who we are and how we're showing up to produce the outcomes we want. And if it comes time to laugh and have fun, we can move in a laugh and have fun state. When it comes time to deliver, it's time to deliver state. When it comes time to go surfing, we'll go surfing. It's accessing that part of you that you want to perform at the best. And by performing, I mean like being your greatest self. So when it comes time, my aunt's birthday was today. So in that moment, it's time to be connected to my heart, to deliver beautiful, loving connection moment to my aunt on the telephone, wishing her happy birthday. I wasn't with her physically. We were in two different places today. Is that communicate?
It is, yeah. So what you're saying is, and the way I'm sort of seeing it, so someone listening to this might go, oh, it's like you have multiple personalities. Like 1 minute you're happy, the next minute you're downplayed. But really what you're saying is you're being the best in every relationship and you're meeting them at what their needs would be with the right intent. And mastery is being able to go, and I now I see that because I know that there's been times when I've had something happen at work that was very frustrating and I wasn't able to shut that off, and then my kids would ask me something and that would carry over, and my lack of self-mastery, unfortunately, my poor kids, I didn't show up the way that maybe I should have. Had it been had more self-control, they didn't deserve that, and nor should I should have more control over my emotions to have been able to stop that. Is that sort of what you're referring to?
Sure. And with love for ourselves, we're not perfect. And the way I would say it is we can rate ourselves in every category of everything on a scale of 1 to 10 on a scale of mastery. And the higher we go up that scale of mastery, the more exponential our returns get. So overall, that might mean your level of self-mastery was at a 9.8. Like you might have been unbelievable, in fact, Scott, and anyone in the circumstance that you were dealing with might have responded the same way. So, and you could, but at the same time, you want to acknowledge that there's still the potential for you to have acted more consistently with who you want to be as a dad. Does that communicate? So
it does, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure somebody out there is listening going, well, okay, if you're able to switch so quickly, you're almost like Spock, like you have no feelings. But I don't think that's what you're saying even remotely. I think it's like you're saying with loving compassion, it's like it's not that you have no feeling, it's that you're showing up in the best version to build the relationships and be the best you can be in every situation that you can.
Yeah, I mean,
kind of what you're saying?
Today in the ocean, I wiped out and wave. I'm like, mother, boop, and I'm like, deep breath. It's fun. Like, it's good. So we're racked. I'm superhuman. I'm super passionate. I'm super energized typically. So I feel deeply, but I'm very conscious of, okay, how do I want to be responding in the moment? And sad things happen. But we can give new meaning. For a quick example, we're down on Long Beach Island, and we're sitting there today, and the topic of my grandmother came up, and she passed away in June. I cry a lot. I cry freely. I feel deeply, and I also move through emotions quickly. So I might be talking about in fact, how's this? We were talking about The Last Jedi, and I had tears in my eyes talking about that last night sitting at Boardwalk. I don't even know if you realized that.
Talking about what?
We were talking about The Last Jedi.
I remember that.
And a quote, I was feeling emotional on the verge of tears because of how powerful and meaningful that moment was of good overcoming evil, etc. So in the Spock comment, I feel super deeply, but I'm also clear on processing through my emotions and sort of recalibrating how I'm focusing on what's happening. Does that communicate?
Totally does.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm glad you made the distinction, because I know that you are that way.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that someone listening doesn't understand that when you're doing this, you're not like a robot going, now I'm with kids. I feel this way. So I think that self-mastery is really more fluid than that.
Yeah. And if I could give the access real quick. So what I might do in that moment is take a deep breath, move, shift state. How we use our body can disrupt the pattern of whatever's occurring for us. Take a deep breath. Your breathing matters. And I might just focus on, think of, so if I'm going to call my daughter, and let's say we're not together, we were not together tonight, and I was going to say goodnight, and there's, a couple of challenges going on for her right now. I'll take a deep breath. I'll focus on her, maybe touch my heart, and all of a sudden, in 30 seconds, I've shifted state, and I'll call her. So it's not like we're robotically recalibrating. Then I'll be done with the phone call. I'll feel the feelings, but okay, now we gotta go. Let's go. Scott's ready. We're gonna do the podcast, and let's go deliver for people. So we're consciously processing through, really feeling the feelings, but understanding that we can take ourselves through that journey. And you and I share a beautiful ecosystem in common with Tony Robbins, and one need only enter a room like that and realize how fast you can process through emotions. Where you get in state and move people through, and that's such an incredible incubator of the concept of our ability of self-mastery. And so I would point towards something like that, or for those that have never been to somewhere like that, you certainly have been a place. It's called a sporting event. And think of how rapidly emotions can shift in a sporting event, and they start playing Charge over the loudspeaker. And unfortunately, a lot of times, because it's suboptimal, a lot of times it takes something good to happen on the field for the crowd to become engaged and the team to shift. I would call that being at effect versus a cause. So self-mastery is about being at cause and not having to wait until something happens coincidentally to begin to build momentum, but to be able to create your own intentional momentum at cause towards what you want. Is that helping?
Yeah, so what you're saying is don't let the environment drive your mood, where you have some control and you can actually drive your mood to affect the environment.
Absolutely. Your mood, your heart, your state, your thoughts, you have absolute access to complete control. I don't do it perfectly, and I'm not claiming that I do, but it is possible. I've lived in that state of super high. I've worked 21 hours a day in a federal trial with corrupt people in every direction, total insanity we're fighting against, and been in a peak state for a month. Truly.
Is this the unwinnable case?
The unwinnable case that I got up every day at 2 o'clock in the morning, and the first thing I did when I got up towards the back half of the month-long trial is I cried. I was in physical pain to the point I had tears coming down my face, and I was conditioned enough that I roll out of bed crying and start doing push-ups and start listening to something, Bruce Springsteen or AC/DC or Van Halen, something to just shift my state, because I was in so much physical pain and overwhelm. And then within 3 minutes, I felt the release of endorphins. I felt differently, and here we go.
Amazing. Yeah. So, this is a business and marketing podcast. So this is one of the 3 pillars that we're talking about.
Yes.
How does, so we can kind of maybe look at wrapping up a little bit of mindset, unless it requires a deeper dive, but where does this fit in for business? And where does this fit in,
Sure.
if we want to marketing, but business overall, like where does this fit in? Why is this important? Because someone might listen going, this is a personal development discussion, but it has a component for business. So tell me why.
Yeah, I mean, it is business. So my entire work is in the space of business, not in the space of just living a happy life. That's the core access of what I teach and share with people. So our self-mastery is only relevant to drive forward the application and use of our process and influence mastery.
All right. Well, that was a great deep dive on the first part of our 3-part series, Self-Mastery with Sean Callagy. And thank you all for tuning in as usual. Please leave some notes and comments in the reviews for us. If you have anything you want to say, just send me to scott@groundswell.marketing. And until next time, mahalo.